Many people say that artificial sweeteners is linked to cancer or to whatever, like it's bad for you. And I disagree. I disagree so greatly with this because there's really no scientific evidence for this. And even when there is, it's unrealistic. And so there are many rat studies that connect artificial sweeteners to cancer. And the one I'm going to go through is connecting aspartame to leukemia. And so I will link the study in the description. And so basically what the researchers found was that for every 400 milligrams per kilogram of aspartame, there was a definite increase in leukemia. So remember that, 400 milligrams per kilogram. And if you take that into account, if you extrapolate it to humans, that comes out to be around 28,000 milligrams of aspartame in a serving, or in a day, for a 70 kilogram person. That amounts to around 140 Cokes in one serving. Can you drink that many in a day? In 2 days? In a week? To drink that in a week, you would need to drink 20 Cokes a day. Is that even possible? Well, maybe it is. Surely it is. But in a day, I don't think that's really possible. 140 Cokes in a day. Even if you only drink Coke as your only liquid, I don't think that's possible. What this is saying is it's an unreasonable amount. Right? It's completely unreasonable to assume that aspartame will cause anything because you need to consume an absolute shitload amount of it to get any effect from it, to find any real increase in cancer. But people will extrapolate this and say it causes cancer, and they don't look at the figures. And this is, of course, assuming that the extrapolation is perfectly linear. Right? So 400 milligrams per kilogram used in the rats can also be used in humans, but that may not be the case. It may be less. And even if it was less, say half, that's still 14,000 milligrams in a serving, or 70 Cokes in a day. I still don't think that's possible. And sometimes it can be above that, right? So even more, even higher than 140 Cokes a day. To me, it's ludicrous to assume that something can cause cancer if and only if you need to take an absurd amount of it. It's like radiation. Radiation is not inherently dangerous, or at least a little bit of it isn't, really. If you take in a lot of it, that becomes extremely dangerous. Microwaves have radiation. X-rays have radiation. They all have radiation. But if you take small amounts of it, it's not dangerous. If you take massive amounts at once, it's very dangerous. And it's just like artificial sweeteners. Right? How many things are you going to sweeten with artificial sweeteners, with aspartame or whatever, in a day? I'd argue not that many, really. Not that many. Even if you have a sweet tooth, you just can't eat that many sweet things in a day. And there is one massive conflict of interest that I want to go into, and that is big sugar. Companies that sell products with sugar or sell sugar directly. There was a massive sugar lobby against artificial sweeteners when they first came out, because the companies knew that if artificial sweeteners replaced sugar, the companies would lose lots and lots and lots of money, because almost every single product right now has sugar in it. And so what happened was a lot of companies paid for studies to try to prove that artificial sweeteners were bad, and therefore they could retain the market share. Yet no study really proved that. But studies like this rat study were extrapolated without the numbers, and therefore I said artificial sweeteners are bad. They were generalized without even looking at the numbers, which is really annoying for me, and I think to a lot of people. It's really annoying because it's not true. It's just not true. Some others may argue that there's an effect on the gut microbiome, and there are literally no studies that have strong evidence showing a negative effect from artificial sweeteners on the gut microbiome. There are literally no studies with that. And finally, there is the naturalistic perspective, which is, artificial sweeteners are artificial, they're chemicals. And I'd like to ask you, What isn't chemical? Water is technically a chemical, but we don't perceive water as a chemical because it's natural. It exists in nature. Well, if you want to argue it like that, there are natural artificial sweeteners. There is stevia from plants. There's monk fruit. These are natural. These are sweeteners that are not made in a laboratory. They may be processed in factories, but all the food that we pretty much eat are processed in factories. And another issue I take with a naturalistic perspective is just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good. Like, if you have a natural poison versus a man-made poison, they're both poisons. It's not really better for something to be natural versus artificial, for something to be man-created. And I feel like there's a sort of moral argument against unnatural products. Like, this isn't natural, therefore it's bad. That's a value judgment. That's a moral judgment. And by making a moral judgment, you're disregarding the facts. Or you're using your moral judgment to justify the facts that you may have found. And so from this video, artificial sweeteners are not poisonous. They are perfectly fine to consume unless you find a way to drink 140 Cokes a day, or equivalent to that, 28,000 milligrams of aspartame in a day. Please try. You'll fail.